The silence in the first-class cabin was deafening. Captain Brock Halloway stood over seat 1. His face turning a shade of crimson that matched the airline's logo. He pointed a trembling finger toward the economy curtain. "I don't care who you think you are," he spat, his voice echoing off the overhead bins. "I am the captain of this vessel, and I say you don't fit the profile for this seat. You move back to row 34, or this plane does not leave the tarmac." Dr. Naomi Sterling didn't flinch. She simply lowered her sunglasses, looked him dead in the eye, and whispered 3 words that would end his career before the landing gear ever retracted. But Halloway didn't know that yet. He didn't know he was screaming at the woman who had signed his paycheck just 20 minutes ago. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with the manic energy of a Friday evening. Outside, the rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the lights of the queued aircraft into streaks of gold and red. Inside, however, the air was conditioned to a sterile chill. Dr. Naomi Sterling adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel. To the untrained eye, she looked like a graduate student running on too much coffee and too little sleep. She wore an oversized charcoal grey hoodie, black leggings, and a pair of vintage sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and large noise-cancelling headphones rested around her neck. There were no logos flashing on her chest, no Louis Vuitton luggage trailing behind her, just a quiet, understated presence that usually allowed her to move through the world invisible. That was exactly how she liked it. She approached the gate for Vista Airlines Flight 402 to London. The gate agent, a harried young man named Greg, who looked like he'd been fighting with a broken printer for 6 hours, barely glanced up as she handed him her boarding pass. "Zone 1 is boarding, ma'am," Greg muttered, his eyes glued to his screen. "Economy is Zone 4. You'll have to wait." Naomi didn't argue. She simply slid the pass closer to his hand. "I believe I'm in Zone 1. Greg sighed, the heavy sigh of a man who dealt with entitled passengers all day. He snatched the pass, ready to point out her mistake, but his fingers froze. The ticket read 1A, first class, full fare. He looked up, his eyes widening as they scanned her casual attire. He blinked, looking back at the ticket, then at her again. "Oh. Apologies, Ms. Sterling. You can go right ahead." "Thank you, Greg," she said softly, offering a tired but genuine smile. As she walked down the jet bridge, the damp smell of rain and jet fuel filled her senses. This was her favorite part of travel, the transition. The moment you left the solid ground and entered a suspended reality. But today, her mind wasn't on the romance of flight. It was on the terrifyingly large merger she had just finalized in a boardroom in Manhattan 3 hours ago. A merger that gave her controlling interest in Vista Airlines. Technically, nobody knew yet. The press release was scheduled for Monday morning. The board members were sworn to secrecy. To the employees of Vista, she was just a name on a manifest, if that. She wanted to fly the product. She wanted to see what she had bought before the red carpet was rolled out for the owner. She stepped onto the aircraft, greeted by the soft jazz music and the smell of warmed nuts. The flight attendant, a tall woman with a tight blonde bun and a name tag reading Brenda, was busy arranging champagne flutes. Brenda glanced at Naomi. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of judgment before professional training kicked in. "Boarding pass?" Brenda asked, her tone clipped. Naomi showed her phone. 1A. Brenda read, her eyebrows knitting together. She looked at the seat, a plush lie-flat suite with a privacy door, and then back at Naomi's sneakers. "Are you sure you didn't get an upgrade at the gate? Sometimes the system glitches." "No upgrade," Naomi said, her voice steady. "I booked it." "Right," Brenda said, sounding unconvinced. "Well, you can sit down, but keep your bag under the seat. Overhead space in first is reserved for larger carry-ons." It was a lie. The bins were empty. But Naomi was too exhausted to fight. She tossed her bag into the seat and sat down, immediately pulling out her tablet to review the Q3 fuel analytics. The boarding process continued. Businessmen in bespoke suits shuffled past, eyeing her with curiosity. A socialite with a small dog in a purse sat across the aisle in 1D, giving Naomi a sympathetic look that felt more like pity. Then the cockpit door opened. Captain Brock Halloway stepped out. He was a man who looked like he had been cast in a movie to play a pilot from the 1970s. Silver hair, a jawline that could cut glass, and an aura of arrogance so thick it was practically a choking hazard. He adjusted his tie, his eyes scanning the first-class cabin to ensure everything was up to his standards. His gaze swept over the businessman in 1D nod of approval, the socialite in 1F flirtatious smile, and then landed on Naomi in 1A. The smile vanished. Halloway froze. He leaned toward Brenda, whispering loudly enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "Who is that?" Brenda whispered back, shrugging. "Seat 1A. Says she has a ticket." Halloway narrowed his eyes. He walked over to Naomi's seat. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't say, "Welcome aboard." He simply loomed over her, blocking the overhead light. "Excuse me," Halloway said. His voice was a deep baritone, commanding and devoid of warmth. Naomi looked up from her tablet. "Yes." "I think there's been a mistake," Halloway said. He wasn't asking. He was stating. "This is first class. The crew rest area is in the back, and non-rev passengers usually sit in economy." "I'm not crew," Naomi said calmly. "And I'm not non-rev." Halloway scoffed a short, sharp sound. "Look, miss, I don't know who you know at the gate, or how you managed to snag an empty seat, but we have a weight and balance protocol. I need this seat for a federal air marshal who might be boarding." "Is there an air marshal boarding?" Naomi asked. "That's classified," Halloway snapped, "but I need the seat clear. You need to gather your things and head back to row 34. There's a middle seat open. I've already checked." The cabin went quiet. The businessman in 1D lowered his newspaper. The jazz music seemed to stop. Naomi felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, the heat of being underestimated, of being told she didn't belong in spaces she had earned 10 times over. But she pushed it down. She was Dr. Naomi Sterling, MIT, valedictorian aerospace engineer, and as of 4:00 p.m. today, the majority shareholder of this airline. She didn't need to shout. "Captain," she said, reading his name tag. "Halloway, I purchased this seat. Full fare. I have the receipt on my phone if you need to see it. I'm not moving." Halloway's face darkened. He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Listen to me," he growled, his voice dropping to a menacing register. "I don't like it when passengers get difficult. You don't fit the profile of a first-class customer. You're making the other passengers uncomfortable with your attire. It's a distraction. Now you can walk to row 34, or I can have security drag you off this plane for failing to comply with a crew member's instructions. Your choice." Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She looked past Halloway to Brenda, who was studiously looking away, pretending to arrange napkins. "Is that a threat, Captain?" Naomi asked. "It's a promise," Holloway said. "I run a tight ship. I don't tolerate scammers in my cabin." The air in the cabin was thick, suffocating. It felt as though the oxygen had been sucked out of the fuselage. Naomi stared at Captain Holloway, her mind racing through the legal ramifications of what was happening. It wasn't just rude. It was a violation of the contract of carriage, a PR nightmare, and a lawsuit waiting to happen. But Holloway didn't see a lawsuit. He saw a young black woman in a hoodie who in his worldview had likely used a stolen credit card or a computer glitch to invade his sanctuary. "I'm waiting," Holloway said, tapping his watch. "We push back in 10 minutes. You're burning jet fuel." "I haven't done anything wrong," Naomi said, her voice raising slightly just enough to carry to the rest of the cabin. "I paid for this ticket. My attire is clean and covers my body. There is no dress code for paying passengers. You are singling me out." "I am maintaining order," Holloway shouted. The facade of the professional pilot cracked. His face was flushing a deep, angry red. "I have flown for 30 years. I know a problem passenger when I see one. You are belligerent." "She hasn't raised her voice once," a voice cut in from across the aisle. It was the man in 1D. He was an older gentleman with silver spectacles, wearing a suit that cost more than a Honda Civic. He looked at Holloway with disdain. "Captain, she's been perfectly polite. You're the one making a scene." Holloway whipped his head around. "Stay out of this, Mr. Henderson. This is a security matter." "It doesn't look like security," the socialite in 1F chimed in, clutching her dog. "It looks like bullying. She has a ticket. Let her stay." Holloway looked as if he'd been slapped. He wasn't used to his authority being challenged by his real passengers. He turned back to Naomi, his eyes filled with a cold, vindictive light. He realized he was losing the room, and for a man like Holloway, that meant he had to double down. He couldn't retreat. "Fine," Holloway spat. "If you want to play it that way." He grabbed the interphone handset on the wall near the cockpit door. "Gate, this is the captain. I have a disruptive passenger in 1A. Refusing crew instructions. Potentially intoxicated. Send law enforcement immediately." Naomi's jaw dropped. "Intoxicated? I haven't even had water." "You're slurring your speech," Holloway lied smoothly, loud enough for the recording devices to pick up. "And you're acting erratic." He hung up the phone and crossed his arms, standing in the aisle like a bouncer at a club. "Police are on their way. Now you're not going to row 34. You're going to jail. Interference with a flight crew is a federal offense, sweetheart. You're looking at 20 years. Naomi felt a cold knot in her stomach. She knew the law. She knew that in the post-9/11 world, a pilot's word was law. If he said she was a threat, she would be removed, arrested, and charged. The truth would eventually come out in court, perhaps months later, but the humiliation would be immediate. The mugshot would be forever. She took a deep breath. She needed to end this, but she couldn't reveal her identity just yet. If she shouted, "I own the airline," she would sound like a lunatic, which would only validate his erratic claim. She needed proof. She picked up her phone. "Put the phone down," Holloway barked. "No recording." "I'm not recording," Naomi said, her fingers flying across the screen. "I'm texting my lawyer." "You can call the president for all I care." Holloway laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "Nobody tells me who flies on my plane." 2 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots echoed on the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers squeezed through the door, their radios crackling. They looked tense hands, hovering near their belts. "What's the problem, Captain?" the lead officer asked. He was a large man with a buzz cut. She's the problem. Halloway pointed at Naomi, who remained seated, her hands visible on her lap. Refused to move seats for weight balance. Became aggressive. I suspect she's on something. I want her off. The officer looked at Naomi. He saw a small woman in a hoodie, looking terrified but composed. He looked back at the captain. "Ma'am, is this true?" "No, officer," Naomi said clearly. "I have a valid ticket. The captain demanded I move to economy because I didn't fit the profile. When I refused, he called you." "She's lying," Halloway interjected. "Brenda, tell them." Brenda, the flight attendant, looked trapped. She looked at Halloway's furious face, then at the police. She valued her job. She was arguing, officer. The captain gave an order. The officer sighed. "Ma'am, look. The captain is the final authority on the aircraft. If he wants you off, you have to get off. We can sort out the refund inside, but you can't stay here." "I understand your position, officer," Naomi said. She stood up slowly. "I will deplane, but I am not leaving the area." "See?" Halloway sneered, stepping aside to let her pass. "They always fold." Naomi grabbed her bag. She stopped right in front of Halloway. She was a foot shorter than him, but in that moment she seemed to tower over the cabin. "You have made a grave mistake, Captain Halloway," she said quietly. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize, and let me sit back down." Halloway laughed in her face. "Get off my plane." Naomi nodded once. She walked off the plane, flanked by the officers. As she stepped back into the terminal, the passengers in first class began to murmur. They knew what they had seen. It was wrong. But Halloway didn't care. He slammed the cockpit door shut. "Brenda," he yelled. "Get the manifest. Let's get that upgrade list moving. I want a suit in 1A, not a hoodie." Inside the terminal, Naomi didn't go to the booking desk. She didn't go to the taxi stand. She walked over to a quiet corner near the window, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number she had saved only hours ago. "David," she said when the line connected. David was the chief operations officer of Vista Airlines. He was currently at a dinner party celebrating the acquisition. "Naomi. Everything okay? You should be in the air." David's cheerful voice rang out. "I'm not." Naomi said, her voice ice cold. "I've just been kicked off Flight 402 by Captain Brock Halloway. He accused me of being a drug addict and had the police remove me because he didn't like my hoodie." There was a silence on the other end of the line, so profound it felt like the call had dropped. He did what?" David whispered. "I want the flight grounded, David," Naomi said. "Keep the door closed. Don't let them push back. I'm standing at gate B12, and I want you to patch me through to the tower or dispatch or whoever you have to call. I want that pilot to know exactly who he just threw off his plane." "I'm on it," David said, the panic audible in his voice. "Give me 30 seconds. Do not leave the gate." Naomi hung up. She turned to look through the glass. The jet bridge was pulling away. The tug was attaching to the front wheel. Halloway was in the cockpit, likely running his pre-flight checks, feeling like the king of the world. Naomi crossed her arms. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Brock," she thought. "Because you just started a war, you can't win." Inside the cockpit of Flight 402, Captain Brock Halloway felt the satisfying vibration of the engines spooling up. He adjusted his headset, feeling the rush of adrenaline he always felt right before takeoff. He had won. The problem was in the terminal likely being fingerprinted, and his cabin was secure. He checked the display screens, all green. "Kennedy Ground Vista 402, ready for pushback," Halloway said into the mic, his voice crisp and professional. There was a pause. Usually the response was immediate. Vista 402, pushback approved. Instead, static crackled. Then a voice that sounded confused and slightly urgent came through. Vista 402, Kennedy ground. Hold position. Do not push. Repeat, do not push. Halloway frowned, glancing at his first officer, a younger man named Timothy, who had been silent during the entire altercation in the cabin. Ground Vista 402. What's the hold? We have our slot. Vista 402, we have a company stop order, the controller said. Dispatch has flagged your aircraft. You are to remain at the gate. Do not, I repeat, do not start engines. Company stop. Halloway snapped, flicking a switch. That's impossible. I just cleared the manifest. We're good to go. Is it maintenance? Negative 402. It's a level 1 executive hold. They are reattaching the jet bridge. Stand by. Halloway ripped his headset off and threw it onto the dashboard. Unbelievable, dispatch is glitching again. Probably some computer error because we removed a passenger. He unbuckled his harness and stormed out of the cockpit. The first-class cabin was quiet, though the tension still lingered. The passengers looked up as he emerged, hoping for an explanation. Just a minor paperwork delay, folks, Halloway announced with a tight, fake smile. The ground computers are slow tonight. We'll be moving in a jiffy. He grabbed the interphone to call the gate agent Greg. Greg. What is going on out there? Why is the bridge moving back? There was no answer. The line was dead. Inside Terminal 4, the atmosphere at Gate B12 had shifted from routine boredom to absolute panic. Greg, the gate agent, was standing behind his podium, his face the color of a sheet of paper. The phone in his hand was shaking. He had just received a call from the Vice President of Operations for the entire East Coast region. The message had been brief, loud, and terrifying. Do not let that plane leave. If the wheels turn 1 inch, you're fired. Standing near the window, the 2 Port Authority officers were still guarding Naomi. They looked bored. Look, lady, Officer Miller said, shifting his weight. We can't stand here all night. You need to come with us to the precinct so we can process the report for failure to comply. Naomi didn't look at him. She was watching the jet bridge slowly extend back toward the fuselage of the Boeing 777. I'm not going to the precinct, Officer Miller, and you might want to hold off on that report. You're going to need the paper for your resignation letter. Miller chuckled, shaking his head. You've got an attitude, I'll give you that. But the captain said, The captain is about to have a very bad night, Naomi interrupted. Suddenly the sound of running heels echoed through the terminal. A woman in a sharp navy blazer, breathless and flushed, came sprinting down the concourse. She was wearing a lanyard that identified her as Sarah Jenkins, JFK Station Manager. Sarah Jenkins was the boss of the gate agents. She ran the entire Vista Airlines operation at JFK. She was a woman who didn't run unless the building was on fire. Greg saw her and practically saluted. Ms. Jenkins, Sarah ignored him. She ran straight past the podium, past the confused passengers, waiting for the next flight, and stopped directly in front of Naomi. She bent over, hands on her knees, catching her breath, then straightened up and looked Naomi in the eye with terror. Dr. Sterling, Sarah gasped. Oh my God, I am so sorry. Officer Miller blinked. He looked at the station manager, then at the girl in the hoodie. Ms. Jenkins, you know this. Passenger. Sarah spun around, her eyes blazing. Passenger, this is the owner of the airline. The silence that followed was absolute. Greg dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the floor. Officer Miller's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Naomi's sneakers, her hoodie, her messy bun. Then he looked at Sarah Jenkins, whose face was deadly serious. "The owner," Miller stammered. "But the captain said she was a drifter, a security threat." "The captain is an idiot," Sarah snapped. She turned back to Naomi. "Dr. Sterling, Mr. David Russo called me directly. He said you were removed, that Halloway called the police on you." "He did," Naomi said calmly. "He told me I didn't fit the profile. He publicly humiliated me. And he had these officers remove me under false pretenses." Naomi looked at the officers. "I assume I am no longer under arrest." Officer Miller took a step back, raising his hands. "Ma'am, Dr. Sterling, we were just following the pilot's declaration. If we had known, answer." "You didn't ask," Naomi said. "You saw a black woman in a hoodie and you assumed the pilot was right. You didn't check my ID. You didn't check the manifest. You just obeyed." She turned to Sarah. "Is the plane secured?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah said. "Bridge is connected. Door is opening now." "Good," Naomi said. She picked up her bag. "Let's go back on board." You want to get back on?" Sarah asked, confused. "We can book you on another flight. We can get a private jet ready in an hour." "No," Naomi said, her voice hard as steel. "I bought a seat on Flight 402. I intend to sit in it, and I intend to have a conversation with my employee." She started walking toward the jet bridge. Sarah Jenkins scrambled to follow her. Greg stood frozen at the podium, praying he wouldn't be noticed. The two police officers looked at each other, realized they had to see this through, and followed nervously behind. The first-class cabin of Flight 402 was murmuring with confusion. The jet bridge had reconnected with a heavy thud. The fasten seatbelt sign was still on, but the engines had idled down. Captain Halloway was standing in the galley, shouting at the purser, Brenda. "I don't care what the ground crew says," Halloway yelled, his face purple. "Go open that door and tell them to get away from my aircraft. We are pushing back." Brenda looked terrified. "Captain, they're knocking. It sounds like management." "I am the management on this plane," Halloway roared. He shoved past her and marched to the aircraft door. He looked through the peephole, saw a uniform, and ripped the handle up. "Listen to me, you idiots!" Halloway shouted as the door swung open. "I already told you the passenger is gone. We are—" The words died in his throat. Standing in the doorway wasn't a ground crew member. It was Sarah Jenkins, the JFK station manager. And right behind her, looking calm and utterly unimpressed, was the girl in the hoodie. Halloway blinked. His brain couldn't process the image. "Sarah. What are you doing? Why is she back here?" "I told the police to take her to jail." Sarah Jenkins stepped onto the plane. She didn't look at Halloway. She turned and held her hand out, ushering Naomi in like royalty. "Please, Dr. Sterling, after you." Naomi stepped onto the plane. The moment she crossed the threshold, the dynamic of the universe seemed to shift. She walked past Halloway without even looking at him, heading straight for seat 1A. "Hey!" Halloway shouted, grabbing the wall to block her path. "You do not walk onto my plane after I kicked you off. Sarah gets security. This woman is deranged." "Captain Halloway, stand down," Sarah barked. Her voice, usually polite and corporate, echoed through the cabin. Halloway froze. "Excuse me." "I said stand down," Sarah hissed. She moved close to him, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You have just grounded a transatlantic flight and called the police on the chairwoman of the board. Halloway stared at her. He looked at Naomi, who had reached seat 1A and was calmly placing her bag back under the seat. He looked back at Sarah. What? Halloway whispered. Dr. Naomi Sterling, Sarah said, enunciating every syllable. She led the investment group that acquired Vista Airlines this afternoon. She owns 51% of the company. She owns this plane, she owns the fuel, she owns the catering, and technically, Brock, she owns you. The blood drained from Halloway's face so fast, he looked like a corpse. His knees actually buckled slightly, and he had to grab the galley counter to stay upright. The entire first-class cabin heard it. Mr. Henderson in 1D let out a loud, delighted laugh. I knew it. I knew she was somebody. The socialite in 1F gasped, clutching her dog tighter. Brenda, the flight attendant, pressed her back against the wall, trying to become one with the upholstery. She remembered every dirty look she had given Naomi. She remembered lying to the police. Naomi sat down in 1A. She settled into the leather, adjusted her hoodie, and then looked up. The cabin was silent. Every eye was on her. She looked at Sarah. Ms. Jenkins, thank you for clearing that up. Of course, Dr. Sterling, Sarah said, bowing her head. Is there anything you need? Yes, Naomi said. She turned her gaze to Halloway. He was still standing in the galley entrance, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The arrogance was gone. In its place was raw, unadulterated fear. Captain, Naomi said. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Come here, please. Halloway moved. It was like walking to the gallows. He walked down the short aisle and stood before seat 1A. He towered over her physically, but emotionally he was on his knees. Doctor Sterling, Halloway stammered. I had no idea. The manifest. It didn't say owner, Naomi finished for him. So that gave you the right to treat me like garbage because you thought I was nobody. No, it was a security judgment. Halloway tried to pivot, his voice cracking. You were dressed, the hoodie. It's not standard for first class. I was trying to protect the integrity of the cabin. The integrity of the cabin, Naomi repeated slowly. She stood up. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen and held it up. It was a video. Mr. Henderson in 1D was kind enough to airdrop this to me while I was standing on the jet bridge, Naomi said. On the screen, the video played. It showed Halloway screaming at her. It showed him poking his finger in her face. It showed him lying to the police about her being intoxicated. This is me, Naomi said, pointing to the screen. Not saying a word. And this is you lying to federal officers. She lowered the phone. That's a felony, Captain. Filing a false police report. Interference with commerce. Slander. Halloway was sweating now. Profuse, cold sweat running down his temples. Dr. Sterling, please. I've been with Vista for 30 years. I'm the senior check airman. It was a misunderstanding. I was stressed. We can resolve this. I'll apologize. I'll make an announcement. You think an announcement fixes this? Naomi asked. She took a step closer. You told me I didn't fit the profile. You looked at my skin and my clothes and you decided I wasn't worthy of this seat. She looked around the cabin. Well, Captain, I have a new profile for Vista Airlines. It's called Competence and Respect. And you don't fit it. What are you saying? Halloway whispered. Naomi looked at Sarah Jenkins. Sarah, is there a relief crew available at JFK? We have a reserve captain on standby in the crew lounge, Sarah said immediately. Captain Miller. He can be here in 15 minutes. Good, Naomi said. She turned back to Holloway. Grab your bag, Brock. You're taking me off the flight, Holloway asked, incredulous. You can't do that. I'm the captain. Not anymore, Naomi said. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. You can't fire me, Holloway shouted, a spark of his old arrogance returning. I have a union. I have a contract. You can't just fire a senior pilot because you got your feelings hurt. Naomi smiled. It was a terrifying smile. I'm not firing you, Brock, she said softly. I'm the owner. I don't deal with HR issues. I'm just removing you from my property. She gestured to the 2 police officers who were still standing by the door, watching the drama unfold with wide eyes. Officers, Naomi said, this man is trespassing on my private aircraft. He has been relieved of duty and is refusing to leave. I would like him removed. The irony hit the cabin like a sledgehammer. Officer Miller stepped forward. A small smile played on his lips. He didn't like Holloway. No one liked Holloway. You heard the lady captain, Miller said, reaching for his handcuffs not to arrest, but to guide. Let's go. You're causing a disturbance. This is insane, Holloway screamed as the officer grabbed his arm. Do you know who I am? I am a senior captain. You can't do this. Move it, pal, the officer said, shoving him toward the door. Holloway was dragged down the aisle, past the passengers he had tried so hard to impress. Mr. Henderson waved a little bye-bye with his fingers. The socialite covered her dog's eyes. As Holloway reached the door, he turned back one last time, his eyes wild. You'll hear from the union. This is illegal, and you'll hear from my lawyers regarding the false police report, Naomi called out. Goodbye, Brock. The door didn't close. Holloway was hauled up the jet bridge, his shouts fading into the terminal. Silence returned to the cabin. Naomi let out a long breath. She sat back down in seat 1A. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the release of anger. She looked up. Brenda, the flight attendant, was standing over her. Brenda was trembling so hard the champagne flute on her tray was rattling. Dr. Sterling, Brenda whispered. Can I get you some water or champagne or anything? Naomi looked at Brenda. She remembered Brenda's silence. She remembered how Brenda had refused to make eye contact when Holloway was bullying her. I don't want champagne, Brenda, Naomi said quietly. Okay, Brenda breathed. Water. I want to know why you lied, Naomi said. The question hung in the air between the plush leather seat and the galley wall. I want to know why you lied. Brenda. A flight attendant with 15 years of experience looked as if she were trying to physically shrink out of existence. Her hands were clasped so tightly in front of her apron that her knuckles were white. She looked at the floor, then at the sleeping passenger in 1D, and finally reluctantly at Dr. Naomi Sterling. I didn't want to lie, Dr. Sterling. Brenda stammered, her voice barely a whisper. But Captain Holloway, he can be very difficult. If we go against the captain, especially a senior Czech airman, he can write us up. He can put notes in our file saying we're insubordinate. I've seen him do it. He ruined a girl's career last year just because she didn't serve his coffee at the right temperature. Naomi listened, her face unreadable. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, moving into the galley so their conversation wouldn't disturb the cabin. The space was tight, smelling of brewing coffee and expensive perfume. Fear is a powerful motivator, Brenda. I understand that, Naomi said, her voice low but firm. He held power over you. But tonight, you saw him abuse that power against a paying passenger. You saw him lie to the police. And when the officer asked you for the truth, you validated his lie. Brenda's eyes welled up. I was scared. I thought you were just a regular passenger. I thought you'd get rebooked and it would go away. That is exactly the problem, Naomi said. You thought I was just a passenger. You thought because I didn't have the title or the suit I was expendable. You were willing to let an innocent woman go to jail to save yourself from a bad performance review. Naomi leaned against the counter, crossing her arms over her hoodie. I'm not going to fire you, Brenda. Brenda let out a sob of relief, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, thank you, Dr. Sterling. Thank you. I promise I... Save it. Naomi cut her off. I'm not firing you because I want you to learn. You're going to work this flight to London. You're going to serve the passengers with the excellence Vista Airlines is supposed to be known for. And when we land, you are going to report to the chief flight attendant for retraining, specifically on ethics and bystander intervention. I will. Brenda nodded vigorously. I absolutely will. Good. Now go help the ground crew close the door. We have a schedule to keep. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere on Flight 402 had transformed. A new voice came over the PA system. It was calm, warm, and devoid of the pompous arrogance that had filled the cabin earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Steve Miller. My apologies for the delay in our departure. We had a minor crew scheduling adjustment. We've got the paperwork sorted, the fuel is topped off, and we are number 1 for departure. We'll be in London in 6 hours and 40 minutes. Sit back, relax, and thank you for flying Vista. As the massive Boeing 777 taxied to the runway, Naomi finally allowed herself to sink into the seat. The engines roared to life, pressing her back against the cushion as the plane hurtled down the wet tarmac and lifted into the night sky. The lights of New York City fell away, replaced by the dark abyss of the Atlantic. Naomi didn't sleep. She opened her laptop. While the rest of the first-class cabin dozed off after their meal service, Naomi was waging a digital war. She connected to the onboard Wi-Fi and pulled up the internal company messaging boards. The rumor mill was already spinning. Did you hear JFK grounded a flight? Holloway got pulled off by cops who is the passenger. Some VIP. Naomi logged in with her new administrative credentials. She didn't post anything. She just watched. She needed to know how deep the rot went. Holloway wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of a culture that had gone unchecked for too long. A culture where seniority trumped decency. Around 2:00 a.m. midway over the ocean, Brenda appeared at Naomi's seat. She held a silver tray with a single glass of water and a small plate of warm cookies. Dr. Sterling, Brenda whispered. Naomi looked up from a spreadsheet. I just wanted to say. Brenda hesitated, her voice trembling again. I'm sorry. Not because you're the boss, but because what we did was wrong. I looked at you, and I judged you. And that's on me. Naomi looked at the woman. The fear was still there, but there was something else now. Shame. Genuine shame. Naomi took a cookie. Thank you, Brenda. We'll talk more in London. It was a small piece, but it was a start. However, Naomi knew the real battle hadn't started yet. Holloway was on the ground in New York. He had a phone. He had a union rep. And he had an ego that wouldn't let him go down quietly. By the time the sun began to rise over the curvature of the earth, painting the clouds in hues of pink and violent orange, Naomi had drafted a press release, a memo to the board, and a legal brief. She watched the sunrise, sipping her coffee. The peace of the clouds was deceptive. She was flying into a storm. The landing at Heathrow was smooth as silk, a testament to Captain Miller's skill. But as the plane taxied to Terminal 3, Naomi's phone, which she had just switched off airplane mode, began to vibrate so violently it nearly fell off the armrest. 57 missed calls, hundreds of texts, Twitter notifications were blowing up. She opened Twitter X and saw the trending topics. Hashtag boycott Vista. Hashtag pilot rights. Hashtag Karen on the plane. Her heart stopped. She clicked the first hashtag. There was a video. It wasn't Mr. Henderson's video of Halloway screaming. It was a video filmed by a passenger in economy, looking through the curtain during the initial boarding. From the angle, you couldn't see Halloway's face or hear his aggressive whispers. You could only see Naomi standing up, gesturing, and the police leading her off. But the caption was the problem. Crazy passenger attacks. Pilot on Vista Flight 402 refused to leave seat. Pilot removed for safety. Woke mob strikes again. Justice for Halloway. Naomi felt a wave of nausea. Halloway had moved fast. She scrolled further. There was an interview clip from a morning news show in New York. Halloway was sitting in a studio wearing his uniform, which he should have surrendered. He looked tired, noble, and aggrieved. "I was just doing my job," Halloway told the sympathetic host. She was erratic. She refused to identify herself. In the post-9/11 world, we can't take risks. I made a command decision to secure the aircraft. And for that, the new management, who wasn't even on the flight, mind you, had me dragged off like a criminal. It's a disgrace to the profession. He was lying. He was lying through his teeth. He claimed management wasn't on the flight. He was banking on the fact that nobody knew Naomi Sterling was the owner yet. The narrative was being twisted. In the public eye, Halloway was the veteran hero pilot, and Naomi was the entitled, unruly passenger who used corporate connections to fire a working man. The plane parked at the gate. Captain Miller came out of the cockpit. He looked at his phone and grimaced. "Dr. Sterling," Miller said, his voice grave. "You've seen it." "I've seen it," Naomi said, standing up and slinging her bag over her shoulder. Her face was set in stone. "There are reporters at the gate," Miller warned. "Ground staff says it's a zoo." "Let them come," Naomi said. She walked to the door. Sarah Jenkins had called ahead to the London team. A security detail was waiting at the end of the jet bridge. As Naomi stepped into the terminal, the flashbulbs blinded her. Reporters were shouting over the barrier. "Dr. Sterling, is it true you fired a pilot for asking you to change seats? Did you use your wealth to bypass security protocols? Captain Halloway says you were intoxicated. Do you have a comment?" Naomi didn't stop. She didn't look at them. She kept her noise-cancelling headphones around her neck, sunglasses on, walking with a steady, rhythmic pace. Her security team cleared a path. She got into the waiting black car and dialed David Russo, the COO. "David," she said, "tell me you didn't issue a statement yet." "We held off," David said, sounding like he was having a heart attack. "But the stock is down 4% in pre-market trading. The union is threatening a wildcat strike. They're saying you violated the collective bargaining agreement by firing a pilot without a hearing." "I didn't fire him," Naomi said. "I removed him from the flight. There's a difference. The public doesn't see that, Naomi. They see a 30-year veteran versus a new owner. The optics are terrible." "David, listen to me," Naomi said, watching the grey London streets blur by. "Do not apologize. Do not engage with Halloway's lawyer. I want you to set up a town hall meeting at the London HQ. Live stream it to the entire company, and invite the press. You want to go live? David asked. Now, in the middle of the scandal. Yes, noon today. Naomi, this is suicide. Let PR handle it. We can release a statement, bury it in the news cycle. No. Naomi snapped. Halloway wants a fight. He wants to play the victim. I'm going to show them exactly what kind of victim he is. Get the AV team ready. And David, yes. Get me the cockpit voice recorder data from the pre-flight checks, and get the security footage from the gate at JFK. I know it exists. I can try. That takes a warrant, usually. I own the airline, David. I own the cameras. Get it. She hung up. The car pulled up to the Vista Airlines European headquarters, a glass monolith in the financial district. Naomi walked in. She didn't go to her office. She went to the server room. For 3 hours, she worked with the IT director, a terrified man named Patel. They pulled logs. They synced timestamps. They overlaid audio from the cockpit with video from the passenger. Mr. Henderson had emailed her the full file, and the CCTV from the gate. It was a masterpiece of evidence. At 11:55 a.m., the auditorium was packed. Employees, shareholders, and press were crammed into the room. The cameras were rolling. The live stream link had been shared on Twitter and was already garnering thousands of views. Halloway was watching from New York, sitting in his lawyer's office with a smug grin. He thought he had her cornered. He thought she would come out, apologize, offer him a settlement, and reinstate him to avoid the bad press. Naomi walked onto the stage. She was still wearing her hoodie and leggings. She hadn't changed. She looked small against the massive Vista logo behind her. She approached the podium. She didn't have notes. "Good afternoon," she said. "My name is Naomi Sterling. Yesterday I bought this airline. Today I'm told I need to apologize." The room went silent. "Captain Brock Halloway has gone on national television and claimed that I was a disruption, that I was a threat, that I was intoxicated." She paused. "He claims he was protecting you, the passengers." Naomi pressed a button on the clicker in her hand. The massive screen behind her lit up. "Let's look at the protection." The video played. It was the footage from Mr. Henderson's phone, synced with the cockpit voice recorder audio, which picked up the conversation through the open door. The audio was crisp. "I don't care who you think you are. You don't fit the profile. Move to row 34, or this plane does not leave." The audience gasped. Then the clip of Halloway calling the police. "Gate, this is the captain, potentially intoxicated," slurring her speech. Then immediately after the footage cut to the Gate CCTV. It showed Naomi standing perfectly still, talking calmly to the officers. Then the audio from the cockpit after the police left. Halloway's voice clear as day, laughing with his first officer. "Did you see her face? They always fold. Get me a suit in one, and not a hoodie. I don't want to look at that trash." The room erupted. The gasp was so loud it sucked the air out of the auditorium. On the screen, the text appeared, "0 alcohol detected in blood work time, stamped 1 hour post-incident." Naomi had stopped at a clinic on the way to the office. Naomi let the video finish. She looked at the camera. She looked straight down the lens, addressing Halloway in New York. "Captain Halloway," she said, "you didn't remove me for safety. You removed me because of your ego. You removed me because you looked at a black woman in a hoodie and decided she couldn't possibly afford a first-class seat. You lied to the police. You filed a false report. And then you went on television and lied to the world. She took a breath. You said I violated the profile of a Vista passenger. You're right. I don't fit your profile. Because your profile is based on prejudice, not policy. She turned to the press. Effective immediately, Brock Halloway is terminated for cause. Furthermore, Vista Airlines is filing a civil suit against him for defamation and damages caused by the delay of Flight 402. We are also submitting this footage to the FAA for a review of his licensure. She leaned into the mic. At Vista, we don't care if you wear a suit or a sweatshirt. We care if you paid for the ticket, and if you treat people with respect. If you can't do that, you don't fly with us, and you certainly don't fly for us. She walked off the stage. The fallout was instantaneous and catastrophic for Brock Halloway. The video went viral within minutes, but not the way Halloway wanted. The hashtag Halloway must go replaced hashtag boycott Vista. The internet, a fickle beast, turned on him with the ferocity of a starving pack of wolves. In New York, Halloway's lawyer watched the press conference on his iPad. He slowly closed the cover of the device. Brock, the lawyer said, standing up. I can't represent you anymore. What? Halloway sputtered, his face pale. We have a case. She recorded me without consent. It's a cockpit voice recorder, Brock. It's federal property. She owns the airline. The lawyer grabbed his briefcase. You lied to me. You said she was drunk. You said she was abusive. That video shows a hate crime, practically. Get out of my office. Halloway was alone. Within 48 hours, the FAA opened an investigation. Lying to federal law enforcement, the Port Authority officers, while acting as a flight crew member, is a serious offense. Filing a false report to dispatch to initiate a security protocol is even worse. 3 weeks later, Brock Halloway's pilot license was suspended pending a permanent revocation hearing. But the real blow came from the community. The pilot forums, usually a place where pilots defended their own, shunned him. He had broken the sacred trust. He had used his authority not to ensure safety, but to bully a passenger. No airline would touch him. He was 55 years old, grounded and unemployable. He lost his pension benefits due to the gross misconduct clause in his contract, a clause Naomi's legal team enforced with ruthless precision. 6 months later. Naomi Sterling sat in Seat 1A on Vista Flight 402 from JFK to London. She was wearing a hoodie. The flight attendant approached. It was Brenda. She looked different, lighter. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Dr. Sterling, Brenda said, welcome aboard. Can I get you a sparkling water before takeoff? That would be lovely, Brenda. Naomi smiled. The cockpit door was open. Captain Miller was doing his pre-flight checks. He waved at Naomi. All green, Dr. Sterling. Ready when you are. Take us up, Captain, she said. Naomi looked out the window as the plane pushed back. The culture had changed. It hadn't been easy. She had fired 3 executives who tried to defend Halloway's old-school ways. She had implemented new training. She had made it clear that Vista was a new airline. She watched the ground crew below. They were waving wands, guiding the massive beast. She thought about Halloway. The last she heard, he was working as a dispatch manager for a trucking logistics company in New Jersey. A desk job. No wings. No authority. Just him and a computer screen, regretting the moment he decided to judge a book by its cover. Naomi put on her headphones. The jazz music played. She closed her eyes. She had bought the plane. But more importantly, she had bought the freedom to be herself, and to ensure that no one else would ever be made to feel small on her watch. The engines roared. They soared. And that, my friends, is the story of how one man's prejudice crashed into a wall of absolute power. Captain Halloway thought he was the king of the sky, but he forgot the golden rule of business. Never insult the person who signs the checks. It's a powerful reminder that dignity isn't determined by what you wear, but by who you are, and sometimes the person in the hoodie holds the keys to the kingdom. Karma didn't just hit Halloway, it grounded him forever. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold at 30,000 feet, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never judge a book by its cover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.